is Brad Reynolds, and he's going to talk to us about no pain, no gain.
So how's that for a depressing title? I wanted to come up with something catchy, and I'm not sure that I didn't maybe make this fit the title, which is not, it's bad to come up with a catchy title to do that, but we'll see how it goes. I'm gonna, pardon me while I wear my new glasses here so I can see what I've written. I've been interested in Buddhist psychology for quite a while, and what has led me to is a lot of self-examination. And part of that, of course, is working with, things you don't like, pain. And I'm not really talking about, this might have been, back in the 70s when I was playing football, this might have been a mantra for training, right? No pain, no gain. I'm not really talking about physical pain. I'm talking about emotional pain, which is, for most people, the bulk of pain you deal with is emotional pain. And you can work with that. It's a little more difficult to work with and improve with physical pain. It's something that a lot of people have to live with, and I know some people in this congregation have dealt with that a lot. But when it's emotional pain, you can work with it. And what turns out is that most of our pain is actually self-generated. That's where I'm going with this. Now, my own personal situation, it's been kind of a hard year for me. My dad fell and had to go into ultimately into the nursing home, but not before. He went through a lot of issues with acceptance, and actually had to go into a psychiatric hospital before he went to the nursing home. It was a long, drawn-out process. It was traumatic, sudden, traumatic, very shocking. A lot, you go through a lot with something like that. And also, Mom went into a nursing home this year, so that was a lot. My aunt, who I'm quite close to, kind of like an older sister to me, 5 years older than I am, had a massive stroke, and she's in a nursing home. So there's been a lot going on, and the circumstances I've been dealing with have made me more aware of how I deal with adversity and how that affects my happiness and sense of well-being. And over some period of observation, not just this year, but for some time, I've been noticing that I waste a lot of effort and energy trying to avoid painful feelings. And I suspect everybody does. And you can let me know, think of your own personal situation with some of the things I'm talking about and see if you can relate to this. Buddhist psychology refers to the way we normally react to experience as grasping, aversion, and delusion. Grasping is our reaction to pleasurable experience, and I kind of did a whole talk on that before about greed and addiction and those kinds of things. This is kind of the flip side of that with unpleasant experience. But in grasping, we try to hold on to things. We seek pleasure. We try to hold on to pleasure. That's why it's called grasping. Aversion is our reaction to painful experience. We avoid and resist painful experience. Delusion is our reaction to neutral experience. If the experience is not pleasant or painful, we tend to ignore what is going on and become lost in thought, or in more recent times, maybe pull out your cell phone and start texting or checking Facebook. These reactions are connected to our survival instinct. There's something that's kind of hardwired in us, I think, for survival. Our family dog, Charlie, demonstrates grasping when he begs for food, aversion when he yelps and runs under the table if you accidentally step on him, and delusion when he takes a nap on the couch when nothing interesting is going on. Now that works pretty well for Charlie, but his brain and his life are a lot simpler than mine. In Buddhist psychology, grasping, aversion, and delusion are called the three poisons. And that label suggests that reacting automatically through grasping, aversion, and ignorance is probably not going to enhance your long-term happiness. Probably not a good thing. My most common reaction to painful experience is aversion. It specifically is anger. I get mad. In many situations, this is automatic for me. I've been doing it for so long that it is a deeply ingrained habit. I was taught by my father and other male role models that anger is an appropriate reaction to pain. Boys don't cry, they get mad. On top of that, I'm a card-carrying, hardwired, short-fused redhead. And some of you can relate to that.
Past days.
X-ray. Anger covers up my feelings about a painful experience. For example, if I get angry when I feel betrayed, I project my feeling of anger onto the perpetrator instead of feeling my own hurt. Ironically, I'm creating an unnecessary painful emotion to cover up the painful emotion I should be feeling. On top of that, anger always makes the situation worse. It creates an escalating cycle of retribution by attacking someone who then wants to attack you, back and forth, and so on and so forth. And on top of that, as often as not, I'm angry at myself. So I'm actually attacking myself, which is not a really good thing to be doing. I also deal with adversity through delusion. I know exactly what Mark Twain meant when he said, "Denial ain't just a river in Egypt." And I don't know about you, but I use denial to deal with my painful feelings by covering over them and not having to think about them. Unfortunately, my problems only get worse when I ignore my problem, when I ignore them or pretend they don't exist. Denial is an even more effective smokescreen than anger. When I deny something that is painful, I don't just cover my feelings up. I completely avoid them. I was also taught denial at a young age. Part of what we do in denial is to alter the story of what happened before we store it in our memory, forgetting the bad parts and amplifying the good parts. If we're really good at denial, we will not learn from our mistakes. I actually learned my denial techniques from my mom. She's got this wonderful sunny disposition, but she maintains it by wearing rose-colored glasses and creating selective memories. I even use grasping to deal with adversity. I cover my feelings with something that gives me short-term pleasure. One of my favorite pastimes during the dark days of winter over the holidays is to self-medicate with bourbon and eggnog. I usually start as soon as the eggnog hits the shelves before Thanksgiving, and I don't quit until it's gone after the New Year. One sign that this has been a rough year is that I still have a gallon of eggnog stocked in the freezer. I've also been known to use food, shopping, a variety of other things. And then we all, I think, have these habits, and it's part of what I talked about before with grasping. But they also kind of serve to give us a temporary high and try to cover our pain. When my dad was going through his divorce from a second wife about 10 years ago, he bought a boat and a car. It's one of the things he was, just trying to ease the pain, I guess. He didn't need the car, and he never even used the boat. Now, these things may feel good in the short term, but they end up causing us more problems than they solve. They actually contribute to our unhappiness in the long run. Well, what do all these reactions to pain have in common? They cover up the underlying pain of the situation, which is what I really should be feeling in that situation. In addition to that, they make the situation worse. The result is that this makes me more unhappy than the painful feelings I'm trying to avoid would. And this is what I mean by no pain, no gain. I'm avoiding the pain I should be feeling by creating more pain. What happens to all those painful feelings? If I don't deal with them and resolve them, they get buried in my subconscious and come back to haunt me later. And we all do this. A lot of this comes from our childhood because children often they don't have the tools to deal with painful feelings. And so they bury them. And a lot of the subconscious pain consists of emotions we couldn't handle from experiences in our childhood. We alter the memory of these, or we even repress the memory of them. And if the pain is there, you don't even know what's causing it. As long as we continue to cover up and avoid our pain, we'll continue to add to our subconscious pain. In Buddhist psychology, the first noble truth is the truth of suffering. And I always thought that was kind of odd. For a long time, I couldn't figure that out. I liked everything else about Buddhist psychology, but I didn't like the part about suffering. And it started to make more sense to me now that I'm kind of looking at myself, and I can see how much effort I put into avoiding pain and how avoiding pain actually creates more pain. And the story of the Buddha kind of goes along with this. He was a prince who was kept inside the palace grounds and sheltered from all the harsh realities of life. And this is what we do. That's how we spend our lives. I mean, as a culture, we're in denial about just about everything, from global warming to, we just don't want to know about the bad stuff, right? It's kind of a natural reaction to avoid pain. But that really doesn't help anything, right? When he finally got out into the world, he was shocked when he saw how much suffering there was. And ultimately, he became a spiritual seeker, became enlightened, and devoted his life to helping people. Likewise, instead of wasting our effort and energy protecting ourselves from pain and denying pain, we could be helping to ease the suffering of others. We have to admit it's out there before we can ever do anything about it, though, right? Pain actually connects us to each other. It's something we all feel and share. We have to open our hearts to our own pain before we can open our hearts to the pain of others. In order to have compassion and help others, we must open ourselves to their pain. There are a couple of practices I'll share briefly with you that I use to open my heart. One is called loving kindness practice. And there are different ways that you can do this, but it basically, I usually think of people, specific people, and generate thoughts of love and kindness towards them, starting with those close to me and working my way out. And you usually try to start with somebody that you are really fond of, a benefactor, or someone you're really close to, and generate the feeling, and then try to maintain the feeling and work your way out further and further out of your inner circle, and ultimately to people that you don't like or have problems with. So you start with somebody you love, and you end up with what you might call an enemy, right? And you try to keep that feeling of love. The big thing is generating the feeling of love in your own self. Another one is Tonglen practice, which is a practice where you actually breathe in the pain of others and try to open yourself to their pain, and you breathe out good feelings to them. So kind of do the same thing. I start, and sometimes I mix the two together, but I'll start with somebody that it's easy for me to work with, and then work my way out to people that are more neutral, not as close, and then ultimately if there's somebody you're having problems with, it's really good with that. Now, back to Charlie the dog. The main reason his life is so much simpler than mine is that he lives in the moment. His adverse feelings and reactions are limited to actual events that he perceives as threatening. Now, I will say that any sound that even remotely resembles somebody coming to the door, he goes nuts over. But it is perceived as a threat. As soon as the threat is over, he drops his guard and he goes on to the next thing happening in the moment. It's over, right? Unlike Charlie, I think a lot. Like most humans, I'm usually thinking about something instead of living in the moment. Here's the problem with thinking. My body doesn't know the difference between a negative thought and an adverse situation in real life. Negative thoughts generate the same feelings and reaction in the body as real life threats do. Stress hormones kick in, the heart rate goes up, the pupils dilate, the palms become sweaty. These feelings in the body are emotion. That's what we call emotion. When this happens, it's almost always caused by thought and not by a direct stimulus in the environment with people, not with Charlie. The body's reaction to thoughts and perceived threats is exactly the same. Our thoughts can generate adverse emotions even when we're in a situation where we are completely safe and comfortable. And if you got a lot on your mind like I do, that safe and comfortable situation may be laying in your bed, comfortable under the covers and warm, and not being able to sleep because of your worrisome thoughts. On top of all that, we don't really control our thoughts. They just happen. The fact that our thoughts generate emotions and we don't control our thoughts causes most of our suffering and unhappiness. We replay adverse situations in our heads and relive painful emotions over and over again. We even create adverse situations that haven't happened and generate painful emotions that are based on complete fantasy. Mark Twain was referring to this when he said, "I've lived through some terrible things in my life, some of which actually happened." All of these negative emotions are stressful to our body. This stress weakens us and makes us susceptible to illness. We say, "I'm under a lot of stress," as if stress is something out there in the environment weighting us down. What causes almost all of our stress is negative thoughts. Even if it is thoughts about something that actually happened, you're not responding directly to a threat like Charlie does. You're responding to thoughts that make up your interpretation of the story of what happened. Just like any story, it can get juicier and more dramatic every time it is retold. This drama inside the head is what's causing our pain, not the events in our life. Mindfulness meditation has helped me to become aware of my thoughts and actually see this going on, which I think a lot of people are so caught up in their thoughts that they're not even aware that this is going on. It helps me to work with my thoughts, spend less time in my head, and more time in the present moment. And just real briefly, for those of you that might not be familiar with this, mindfulness meditation is basically watching your thoughts. Most people just follow their breath and use their breath as an anchor to come back to, so that you're not swept up in your thoughts all the time. And you just sit and breathe and try to stay with your breath. And when you get lost in thought, you come back and you see what's going on with your thoughts. And that's the main type of meditation practice that you find in Buddhism. In conclusion, most human suffering is self-generated. We add to our pain in an attempt to not feel our pain, and we amplify our pain through our thoughts. Now, there has to be a better way of dealing with this. And I'll just kind of go back through some of the things I've talked about, and what would be a better way to do this? Well, don't cover or deny your true feelings. If I feel angry and I'm lashing out at someone, I'm covering my feelings and making things worse. Depending on the situation, if I'm feeling sad, hurt, or remorseful and feeling my own pain in the situation, and probably feeling like I want to cry, then I know I'm not covering my feelings, and I'm probably doing the right thing. I'm going to the right place with that. Be present and work with your thoughts. Since most painful emotion comes from our thoughts, if I'm present and mindful of my thoughts, I can avoid a lot of that painful emotion, or at least minimize it. And last but not least, I hadn't really talked about this, don't fight the situation, accept it. The real key to happiness is my relationship to adversity. It's easy to be happy when I'm on top of the world and everything's going my way. But when what hits the fan, it's a different story. Circumstances of life are always changing and don't always go the way we want them. There's a really kind of neat poetic name for this in Buddhist psychology. It's called the 8 worldly winds. There's pleasure and pain, there's gain and loss, there's praise and blame, there's fame and disrepute. And I don't think there's anybody in here who is had all pleasure and no pain, right? If there is, I'd like to meet you and talk with you and see what's going on there. Same with gain and loss, same with praise and blame, same with fame and disrepute. When our happiness depends on circumstances, we're locked in a futile struggle to make everything go our way. And I think most of us spend our lives trying to do that. It's impossible. Ultimately, it adds to our unhappiness. It makes us miserable. Our normal reaction to adversity is aversion. We fight against things we don't want. I need to examine each situation and ask, is it even possible to change this and make it come out the way I want to? A lot of times it isn't. And the struggle's completely futile. And I don't usually have as much trouble with that because I can see, a lot of times you can tell the things you're not going to be able to change and you have to accept them. But it's a little bit harder on some other things. So the second question is it worth the struggle to change this and make it come out the way I want it to? And that's where we really have to use our judgment. If the either answer is no, then you're much better off to accept the situation and not fight against it. So, any comments, questions? It's like in another world there, those glasses. I didn't even know you guys were out there. Anybody? Can you relate to those observations? Am I like on another planet or no? Okay, good.
No, I feel like I have to listen to this at least one more time in order to get the whole thing sorted out.
Yeah, that's why I wrote it out.
But I feel like it's really important. I feel like it's really important as far as how I relate to things, especially the part about anger and the acceptance of pain and avoiding pain with anger. Gosh, I do that. And I hadn't even seen it properly until you said it.
Well, the problem is we're locked in these patterns that we actually start to develop as children. And for the most part, I think we're not even aware of it. now starting to just become a little bit aware of it. That's not to say I'm really doing anything about it or, you know, have an effective. I've got a strategy, but incorporating the strategy on, you know, changing your habits is really bad. But at least, you know, to be aware of it, you know what's going on. That's a start.
That's a start.
Yeah.
First, we ran a Buddhist temple in Michigan. He was a lovely man and a friend of the Dalai Lamas. And used to be able to hear his talks on public radio. And he always emphasized anger management. He thought that was the biggest problem that most of us had was anger management.
Yeah, I know that's my biggest problem. There's no doubt about that in my mind. And you do hear a lot. Thich Nhat Hanh's got a book on anger. You hear that a lot, and talk about a lot you know, by Buddhist teachers. Yeah, go ahead.
I read quite a bit about Buddhism and do a meditation practice 2 or 3 times a week. I read recently that in the West we're hardwired to do anything we can to get away from adversity. You know, we have this idea that, you know, the good guy gets the girl, that everything will be right in the end, everyone lives happily ever after, and that's not reality. You know?
Yeah.